clean up Harold's mess here. I thought about trying to jump up, but I don't know about you, my life just goes better when I take the steps. My name's Beth Hartley. I'm an alcoholic. And thanks to the grace of a loving God, steps, fellowship, tradition, sponsorship, I've been sober since June 26, 1988. And that is an absolute miracle. That was a miracle by 4th of July, 1988. I just was not one of those people that ever really enjoyed not drinking. And if you were hanging out with me when I was not drinking, you were not having much fun either. So usually by day 10 of not drinking, one of you would be saying, oh, you could probably have a beer. I use my last name for a lot of reasons. One is my father said I never drank anonymously. And you know, it's hard to find Beth. When I lived I got sober in Cincinnati, Ohio. And up there, I literally met one other Beth in Alcoholics Anonymous in 14 years, and she lived in Cleveland, Brecksville. And then I got down to Cary, North Carolina, and I'm in a women's meeting that might have 40 people, and there were 6 Beths in the room. So if you came to North Carolina and tried to find Beth in AA, you would have a hard time if you didn't know who I was. Chuck and I are probably one of the last 10 people on earth that still have a landline, and it's just so you can find us. You know, it's so you can find us. And we have met a lot of people just because they happen to be passing through town, or they were looking for help, or they knew we would know someone, and we would have missed all of that with an unlisted number. I don't know about you, but since June 26, 1988, I haven't needed an unlisted number. It always takes a minute to stop and breathe. Everybody has done such a great job this weekend. Sometimes we joke about bat and cleanup on Sunday, but that is not the case today. Everybody's been wonderful, and I'm not going to name them all because I'll miss one and then I'll have a resentment. But everybody's been great, and I love it when God shows. You can just tell on these weekends when God shows up, and the whole room just moves together, and the synergy is greater than the sum of the parts. That it just, there are some conventions around. This is one of them. Girl Talk, which has been mentioned a couple of times in Atlanta, is one that I have been for the last 4 or 5 years. And God not only shows up down there, He shows off. It is just and take it from me, if you ever had told me that I would be excited about going to spend a weekend with 700 women on purpose, not a chance. I mean, when I passed through AA and they said hang out with the women, I was horrified. I'm like, I didn't even drink with women. Why would I hang out with them sober? I mean, God, they wear pink, I mean, just... But, I was not one of the people who walked through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous and said, oh, thank God I'm home. I've been waiting to find you. I tried everything to stay out of AA, everything. And I went to my first AA meeting in 1966. I'm not that old. My dad got sober when I was 7, and I'm 60 now, just so you don't have to do the math. 50-10, I'd like to say. Not quite ready to be 60. 50-10 softens the blow a bit. But I was going to AA meetings as a kid, so I knew that AA was full of old guys that drank coffee and ate donuts and smoked because I had seen it myself. Now, my dad was 36 or 37 by this time, so they're all on death's door. And but I didn't grow up with crazy alcoholism. And the reason I'm telling you some of this, one is so you'll know who I am. But one of the things I love about Step 12 is I was sponsored a woman years ago, and we had gone through the steps, and she goes, okay, Step 12, get a new girl, right? And I was thinking, no, there's a little more to it than that. And we have actually done entire weekend retreats on Step 12 because there's so much to it. It's just, the first thing it says is having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. That's a big deal, especially for those of us who come in and are confused when God is not blasting us at Step 3. Everybody's covered it really well. that, we, step 3 is kind of when we decide to try to hook up with God. That we, if I could have found God in step 3, I'd have a 3-step program. I mean, why do all that extra stuff if you don't have to? I am what my husband, who has an MSW type, he terms me as having a type AL personality. And for those of you who don't know all the technical terminology for master's degrees in social work, apparently that means I have a type A personality, but I'm lazy enough that I'm not annoying. So while they try to teach you in school, set a goal, work for the goal, achieve the goal, my view on life has pretty much always been just give me the goal. I am perfectly content to set my chair up at the start line and let you bring me the trophy. Why would I work for it if you could just give it to me? When I got sober and they would read the how it works and talk about running the show and this and that and and being self-centered and I'll tell you, I think of it as kind of drive-by Alcoholics Anonymous for a period of 5 years. I never really was in, I never slipped, I never relapsed, I never was sober long enough, and well, I'm just going to say it. Slipping, relapsing, bottom line, you're taking a drink. That's what you did. Maybe if we don't soften the language, maybe if it hurts a little more, maybe we won't have to do it so often. But I never stopped drinking long enough to even be considered to have come and left. I came to stay out of jail. I would go to treatment to stay out of jail. Well, first I went to AA to get a job back. One meeting, got my job back. AA works, it really does. Then I went to treatment to stay out of jail, and I'm a test taker, so if you're a test taker, you can ace treatment. And I would come out of treatment most likely to stay sober forever, and then I give it everything I had, everything, God, for a good week or two, and then I'd be off and running for another year, and then I go to treatment to stay out of jail. So that was kind of my AA from 1983 to 1988. I just did an occasional drive-by, enough to keep the law off, enough to keep the heat off. But I never was in to go out, so I don't really ever consider that I came in I was never in. I was around, I was cruising by, but I was never in. It was interesting. I was up in the Akron area earlier this year, and there were 5 brothers up there. And they all got sober, gosh, they're between, 37 and 47, 45. All 5 of them, the baby of the group is 37 years sober. And the oldest one is 40-something, 45. And every one of them, when they introduced themselves, said, my name's Joe, whoever, and I've been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous since, before God was around. And it really struck me because sometimes I don't think that we emphasize that enough, that I am in Alcoholics Anonymous. I am in it. I am in the middle. When I came in and stayed, I got dragged into the middle. I kind of unwittingly wandered into the middle, but they kept me. And I have stayed there since. And all of these people that you have heard all weekend, we are in the middle. We are on the firing line. One, it's never boring on the firing line. That's where the action is. But that's, one of my favorite Scott Redmond sayings is that he goes, I would have to remind myself that most of my problem areas weren't even areas when I got sober. And so because of Alcoholics Anonymous, I had the trip of a lifetime a couple weeks ago. I got to go to Australia to attend an Alcoholics Anonymous convention. And I got back a week ago Friday, and the jet lag was just killing me. And I felt better when I found out everybody else still felt bad too. But I just thought, I would go to whine about it, and I think, yeah, this was a big issue when you were sitting at the Dewdrop Inn wondering where you were going to get a beer, like, oh, the jet lag. Was not on my list of problems, Sometimes we tell new people, if you make a list of what you want, and just put it in a box, pull it out a year later, you will laugh. And I got to tell you, my list when I got here had 3 things on it. I wanted my driver's license back. I wanted to stop getting arrested. I wanted to maybe, someday, maybe remarry, preferably to a guy with a job, which doesn't come up at last call a lot, you know. I don't know about you, but that's where I did most of my dating. So it just doesn't seem important at 2:30 in the morning, you know. Like, are you employed? Nice car. Is it paid for? You know, are you married? None of that stuff is, you know, I mean, true love is true love at 2:30. But long before I drank, you know, I was everything the book says. I was self-centered, I was self-conscious, I was self-obsessed, and I would have told you none of that applied to me when I was doing drive-by in AA. I heard them talk about being self-centered, and I thought that meant vain and selfish, neither of which I thought really applied to me, which should give you a clue to the vanity thing. But, you know, I didn't know that self-centered was how I'd lived my life. I grew up as a spectator in my own life. It's like there was this separate camera up here scanning, watching everybody watch me, and how am I doing, and, you know, what do I look like, and what do I have to do so you'll like me, and what do I have to do so I can go where you go, and I didn't know self-centered meant things like if I can't win, I don't want to play, you know. And it's not even because I had to win. It's because you can't see me lose, you know. I didn't know self-centered meant you will never see me try anything new in public ever because I might do it wrong. I didn't know self-centered meant that I'm going to have one good friend at a time. One. Please don't talk to my friend because she will like you better and I'll have to find another friend, and I lived in a small town, you know. I didn't know self-centered meant if I walked into a room and two people in the back leaned their heads together and laughed, I knew they were talking about me. You know, I didn't know any of that I thought the whole world was watching me all the time. And I was an only child of an only child, so as Chuck said, my husband says I could have my family reunion at the kitchen table, and we would have chairs left. And from as far back as I can remember, if I was alone, I was in an unfriendly place. It was too loud if I was in a quiet room because I had all these voices in my head, and I started, we went and took a meeting to a psych ward once, and I started to talk about that. Chuck's like, don't say that here. But I did. I had this chorus of voices in my head. None of them liked me. You'd think in your own head you could get one friendly voice, but not in my head. And they would tell me things like, nobody likes you, you know, and I'm 4. And they would tell me people are talking about you, people are laughing at you, people are, you know, you just don't do that, you might do it wrong. And I couldn't be in a quiet place because it was too loud. And we usually lived next door to a big family, so I would just go hang out at their house where there was noise and chaos. Because if I was home, it was too loud. And I was a reader. I learned to read, you know, before I got to school, which I think is, I'm sure, why school came easily to me, because I had been such a reader. Because, you know, if school had not been easy, I wouldn't have been on the honor roll, because that requires work. But school was easy, and I had that intellect, that test taker intellect of, you know, math and reading and all that was easy for me. So I got the grades, and I cruised through school. But I was doing everything. I was dancing as fast as I could to stay ahead of the noise in my head. And by the time I'm in junior high and high school, I am, you know, pep club, drill team, cheerleading, yearbook staff, student council, honor society, you name it, I am doing it because I have to stay ahead of the noise. And when I took a drink, you know, I was 15 years old when I drank enough that I felt the effect of beverage alcohol. And when that first wave of alcohol hit, I didn't know that I had been holding my breath for 15 years until I could exhale. I didn't know I couldn't breathe until I started breathing. And that alcohol was like a breath of life for me. And, you know, even it's like and I know, you know, if you're alcoholic, you're going to know what I'm talking about. I don't even have to drink it to feel better. I just need to know it's in the car. You know, that 140-degree bottle of Wild Irish Rose is under the car seat, but you know it's there. It paralyzes your throat on the first drink. By the way, you know why you drink square bottles, right? Wild Irish Rose, Jack Daniels, all that, right? Doesn't roll out from under the car seat. These are important tips you pick up along the way. But I don't even have to drink it to feel better. I just need to know it's out there. And from that point, at age 15, I didn't get knee walking drunk the first time because some of my friends were starting to drink and falling down and throwing up and looking bad. And you can already tell looking bad is not high on my list. But it was enough. It was enough that I exhaled, and I took my friend out to drink with me so I'd have somebody to drink with. We'd been friends since we were 4, and we didn't make it another year because we drank different. You know, had I had daily access, I would have been a daily drinker at age 15. I grew up in Oxford, Ohio. That was my first resentment. I didn't want to be from Ohio. I actually was roaming the streets of Oxford while Kent was roaming the streets attending Miami University in Oxford. You know, I mean, now I know Sandy Beach always said the longer you're sober, the better your childhood gets. And that's true. You know, looking back now, it was a great place to grow up. It was a clean, safe place, good, solid Midwestern values. You know, my friends and I could just attend college sporting events unescorted. In first and second grade, we could walk to the football game. It was great. But, you know, before that, I was born in Northern California, moved against my will to Ohio at age 2, and and the first day of first grade, I'm looking at a map of the United States, and I see California where I'm supposed to be, and I see all the oceans and the Gulf, and, you know, and then I see Ohio. And I just remember thinking in first grade that you could look at a map and tell nothing's happening in Ohio, you know? And it's like, what I know now is I was already restless, irritable, and discontent. In first grade, I am restless, irritable, and discontent. If you would do this, if you'd stop doing that, if I had a brother or sister, if my mom didn't work, if my bike was blue instead of red, you know, whatever, I was already looking to the whole outside world to make the inside better because the inside was not working for me. But if you'd asked me what was wrong with me, you know, at 6 years old, you can't articulate that you're suffering from a spiritual malady that only a spiritual experience is going to conquer. You know, I just thought I hated Ohio. And so I just, you know, and then in fourth grade, I find out it's warm other places year round. You know, double whammy against my parents now. So I started a campaign to get them to move south, and that didn't work. I've never been much of a winter person. And so I, you know, but from that first drink at 15, I got sober at 29 and a half. So in 14 short years, you know, all of that problem, because I went off to college with 98th percentile ACTs and SAT scores, you know, I mean, I should have been in the top tier of any school. I'm a test taker. My follow-through, not so much, you know, and I flunked out of school because I guess it goes better if you go to class. But I wasn't skipping class to drink. I was skipping class because I had no access to alcohol, and I couldn't get out of my room. You know, I somehow just brilliantly put myself in the middle of a 21 state when 18 states still existed. And, you know, I can't function without a drink in my hand. That's my oxygen, you know, but I don't know that. And so in that 14 years, I flunked out of school. I got a job in a bank because I figured I'd disgrace my parents. Small town, everybody's looking. Banks work Monday mornings. That was a super short career. And, you know, and then I ran away from home. I had always wanted to go to Florida. I finally got up the motion to go. Somebody knew somebody down there. Ran away. Literally, this is the God's honest truth. I'm looking in the rearview mirror all the way through the state of Kentucky waiting for the sheriffs to pull us over and make me, the runaway, go home. I get down there, I get a job in a convenience store. I finally call my parents 2 weeks later to let them know I'm alive and tell them where I am. And Mom asked me why I didn't tell them I was leaving, which I thought was kind of ridiculous since I had run away. And then she pointed out that I was 19 years old and I could have just moved. And oh God, such a loser. Oh God. I had no idea. I don't ask questions, you know. If I ask questions, you would know I don't know. And I live by 2 mottos always. One is, it is not all right not to know. Don't ask a question. I would never ask a question at school. Then if you asked a question, I felt bad for you because the whole room knows you don't know now, you know. And the other one is never, ever, 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 ever admit that you have made a mistake. Now, this turned a one-night stand into a 5-year marriage. I used to say there never should have been a second date. You know that whole more will be revealed thing? About a year and a half ago, I remembered there wasn't a second date. He had a keg party, and I stayed. It was him or move back to Ohio. What would you do, you know? But anyway, in 14 years, you know, college is gone. I have this sham of a marriage, finally get out of that. I have 2 kids from that marriage. And by June 26, 1988, the children are not in my custody. They have not been in my custody since 1985. My integrity's gone. My employability is gone. My complete worth is gone. And you know, it's like, sometimes we'll say we pushed it across the bar for a drink or we sold it for a drink, but to me, it's like I pawned it. I pawned it for a drink because I always thought I'd go get it back. You know, even growing up with a dad in AA, I'm under the delusion that somehow I am still in control of this, and you just hold this for me, but I'll come back and get it. And that just wasn't the case. And when my children were removed from my custody, that's the first time I went through treatment to stay out of jail because I was looking at child endangerment charges. I ended up in an all-female treatment center. I was not happy about that. But they would bring people to talk to me who didn't want to leave their children for 6 weeks because I'm a test taker and I can say all the right stuff. And I would tell these other women, better 6 weeks now than forever later. You know, if we're not sober, we can't be parents. And I knew it was true. But the big book talks about a double life, the one we know is true and the one we want people to see. And I had realized that while I was in there as the alcohol left my system, that I was relieved my mom had my kid. You know, that whole I'm not hurting anybody but me. My mother got a 2 a.m. phone call, and at age 51, with 0 warning, became a single parent of a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old at 2 a.m. But I'm only hurting me, you know. Her life got turned upside down, and I just resented her for making me look bad, you know. And so now I'm in treatment, and I realize, you know what, I don't really want my kids back. I mean, that single parent stuff is hard. It's hard. I knew I couldn't do it. I knew they were in better hands with her. I knew they got to daycare on time and clean clothes. I knew they got a bath at night. I knew she fed them dinner at dinner time. Not that I never did any of that, but I wasn't real consistent, you know. So now I got this big secret, can't tell anybody, don't want my kids. You talk about looking bad, you just run that by somebody. So I would, I would tell you I wanted my kids back, but there was nothing in my actions that said I wanted my kids back. As my friend Ellen says, you know, turn down the sound and look at the picture. What are the actions telling you? And I wasn't going to meetings, I wasn't calling anybody, I wasn't reading the book, I wasn't praying, you know, I just was talking the game. And when I went through treatment, it just so happened my dad died suddenly, and I was the only child of divorced parents, so I got the insurance money and I got to drink the way I wanted to drink for another 2.5 years. And finally, in June 26, 1988, I just was out of plans. You know, there's much more happened, but that's the gist of it. You know, if you want to wonder if I'm powerless over alcohol, the last winter that I drank, my son was in kindergarten, and they had their little Christmas pageant. And by now I'm sleeping in a friend's attic. I used to say I moved into an attic apartment, but it wasn't. It was an attic, and with a bed. And so I knew they were coming to pick me up at 6 for Robbie's Christmas pageant. And I went up at noon to get a beer. You know, I walked up the street just to kind of stop the shakes. And I spent 4 hours in agony in that bar. Agony, trying to determine what would be worse, not being there when they came to get me, or being drunk when they came to pick me up. You know, that's not something I ever would have done I love my children with the capacity I had. I love my kids, but I am just torn. What do I do? Do I not go, or do I go? You know, and I ended up running home and, you know, changing into a clean sweater. And my mom told me after I got sober that when I walked out the front door, my 5-year-old son from the back seat said, "Oh no." That's where alcoholism took me. You know, when I want to wonder, was I powerless, I just need to look at that. Let alone not wanting them later, I can just look at that. So I went through detox, and then I just had this, you know, I really realized I didn't have any plans to be 30. I was 29 and a half. I thought I'd be dead. So I didn't really have any plans for the future. And it became very, very clear while I was in detox that I wasn't, you know, it's like this voice came out of nowhere and just said, "People like you don't die, Beth." And I knew it was true. You know, we got a friend, Jean's here somewhere. We have a friend in Greensboro, there she is, that says, that says, grace is a moment when you see everything exactly the way it is. And I knew right there, right then, that detox bed, I was going to live 40 or 50 more years, drinking or not. And that there were a lot of 70-year-old wino women out there, and I could be one of them, And that scared me. Dying didn't scare me. The only reason I never attempted suicide is I knew I would live. On some level, I knew something would go wrong. I'd probably be maimed and look bad. And so suicide's off the table, but if you take me out in my sleep, I'm totally fine with that. And so I'm in detox, and I was going to go through treatment, and they said no. And I'm just thinking, excuse me, But what the guy said was, Beth, you know everything we're going to tell you. Why don't you go do it and save the bed for somebody who doesn't have the information? Great. But I knew it was true. I knew that was the truth. And I'll tell you, if I'd had 30 days to rest up, I would have had a plan by the time I got out. And once we got a plan, look out, it's going to work this time. I just know it. If you are new here and you have a plan on how to do AA your way, come tell us your plan. We love a good plan, Ron, Debbie, Ellen, we've heard some doozies, My favorite to date is one last dope deal to set myself up financially for sobriety. Not a good plan. But anyway, I had this passing thought, whatever you're doing isn't working, and those people in Alcoholics Anonymous are staying sober, maybe you should just do what they do and see what happens. And I had no idea that was a surrender that would stick, because I was a biker, for God's sakes. I thought I'd go down in flames. I didn't know how, but it was going to be big, and it wasn't. It was pathetic. And I started going to AA, and I wandered into this group that read a chapter of the Big Book every day. So every 13 days, I heard the first 11 chapters plus a preface and a foreword. Heard it. They didn't read a lot at the beginning of the meeting, so when they read the chapter, there was still 25 minutes for discussion. And the big joke on me was I didn't know that people who go to meetings like that tend to be the ones that read it and do what it says. And I went so I wouldn't have to read the book at home. That's why I went, I couldn't read. My brain was sawdust, But somewhere in there, I just kind of decided I'm going to do all of it. And somebody said, You've been around before, Beth, why don't you write an inventory? And I thought, okay. I didn't know I could say I wasn't ready, and I wrote it the way it's laid out in the book. And I'd heard another woman tell a room full of people the first day I got out of detox that she did not want to take care of her daughter. She just wanted to drink. And I couldn't believe somebody just told my big secret to a whole room. So she heard my fifth step, and my life took off. My life took off. It is my experience that writing a four-step takes 3 or 4 hours, or it takes 2 weeks and 3 or 4 hours, or it takes 6 months and 3 or 4 hours, or it takes 5 years and 3 or 4 hours if you live. That first inventory, that's for what kept me up at night. That's for what kept me from, maybe I wouldn't drink for a day or two, and I'd be almost to the pillow, and the committee would launch, yeah, but you don't even want your own kids. What is wrong with you? That first inventory was to purge all of that stuff. I have seen the guides and the 600 question models, and I'll tell you, we have a little saying where I got sober, which is get a gun, it would be faster. That's my opinion, but I'm right. I think if I had remembered it all at once, it would have killed me. I trust God to bring that stuff up when it's time, I didn't have to lock myself in a closet for 3 weeks to write my inventory. I knew what was there. I knew. I prayed, God, let me see the truth, and it came out on the paper. And my sponsor heard my fifth step. And, of course, 6 and 7, when you're new, is like paragraph, awesome, on to step 8, And 6 and 7 didn't really roll around and slam me in the head till about 3 years sober. And just one day, a friend of mine was in the Big Book meeting, and he said, yeah, I know I'm lustful, but what if I ask God to take it and He does? What if I never get laid again? And we're all like, And he goes in, and he goes, and I lie to get what I want. So if I ask God to take it and He does, how will I get what I want? I know, right? And I just had this, I'm kind of a visual thinker, and he was saying that, and all of a sudden I just got this picture of like this carpenter's belt, you know what I mean? The leather belts with all the pockets. And like, here's my character defects in my belt. Lying, manipulating, cheating, stealing. All these things are my tools to get what I want. to arrange the outcome so it should happen the way I see it. And AA is not saying don't use your tools. No. AA says take off the tool belt and lay it on the ground. And if that's not bad enough, then hold hands with us. So now my tool belt's on the ground, and I'm holding hands with God and AA. Who am I going to let go of to pick up my tools? Not a good choice. God? No. AA? No. Crap. And I had to start to trust that whatever was out here was going to be out here without me hanging on to it, without me putting it there, without me rearranging it, because my hands are busy. My hands are holding hands with God and AA. I don't have a hand to arrange the scenery and the lights. I don't have a hand to pick up my tool belt. You know, stuff comes and stuff goes, and we stay sober through all of it. You know, I got sober with no kids. You know, later I got custody of the kids back. Later after that, Chuck and I were saying, you wanted them back. No, you wanted them back. No, you wanted them back. Because you know what? Cute little kids, they turn into teenagers. And we had some times without, you know, it's been talked about this weekend. Bill says there will be certain trials and low spots, you know. It is not always rainbows and unity. Is my life better than it's ever been? Absolutely. Have we had some dark times? Absolutely. But we didn't have to do them alone. Now, that doesn't mean we don't feel alone. You know, long time ago, I think it might have been Scott Lee was talking, and he said that the reason that we have to develop this relationship with God is because there's going to come a day when we are in so much pain that we are not going to be able to see, hear, or feel anyone else around us, even though we're there. It's like we have to go to the mountain alone, and we better have that relationship with God when we get there. Now, everybody's still there, but we can't see, feel, hear Him because we are in that kind of pain. And if I don't have a God when I get there, what do I do? You know, and we've had that cute little boy, you know, became a teenager, became a suicidal teenager. You know, we had suicide attempts. We had, you know, some of us don't react normally to medication. You might have noticed that by now. And so they put Robbie on Prozac, and within a week he went from trying to kill himself to threatening to kill us. So apparently Prozac makes him aggressive. And God, we reached a point where he couldn't stay at our house, you know, and we're looking at long-term. First, we're looking at long-term lockups because he's not getting any better, and they got him on all this medication, and you know he's already in the hospital week 3 of what should be a 4-day stay, and something just clicked, and we said, yeah, okay, he's depressed, but this just sounds kind of like alcoholism, you know, and we went to the counselors at his school and said, look, we need to talk to these friends. We just do. And we told the kids, we don't care what you're doing. You know, we just care what he's doing, and if we're treating him for the wrong problem, he's going to die. And one friend called me later and said, he's doing this, this, and this. And so we called the doctor at the hospital and said, take him off the Prozac. You know, just what have we got to lose? We're looking at long-term lockup because he can't come home. And so he pulled him off the drugs on Sunday, and we went in Tuesday, and the lie broke, and he was home on Friday that fast because we were treating him for the wrong problem. It really makes me wonder how many of us are locked up that shouldn't be. But, you know, we still, you know, within a year, things were getting crazy again. We're looking at Boys Town, but that's voluntary. If he gets there and he wants to go home, they just send him home. So what do you do? How do you find these places? Well, Peg Martin's my sponsor, you know. And I'm calling Peg saying, what do I, wilderness school? I mean, we didn't even know what to do. And I called Peg, and she's like, Al runs one of them. Dick sponsors him. And so, like, here's the number. 3 weeks later, my son is chopping wood in Dillon, Virginia. And he was at wilderness school for almost 1.5 years, but it saved his life. I'm convinced of that. And, you know, we kind of got together, and it wasn't cheap, but we just decided, you know what, you can go to college broke, but you can't go to college dead. And so his college money paid for that. I don't know why. Somebody must have a kid that might need wilderness school. I never talk about that. Anyway, but, you know, there have been tough times. But this whole step 6 and 7 thing, for me, when I go back around, there's a little work involved. You know, the 12 and 12 says that God isn't going to take it without our cooperation. That's one of those little throwaway lines that you go back later and go, oh, you know. It's like, because we go, well, he took the drinking. why can't he take this, right? But, like, when God took the obsession to drink, I wasn't just sitting home waiting for the obsession to drink to go away. I got this whole new set of behaviors to substitute for my old behaviors. Go to meetings, call people, pray. Go to more meetings, call more people, pray more, read the big book. So I had this whole set of behavior to substitute for what I used to do in addition to prayer. And as I did that, my heart began to change. This is the part to me. This is, God might remove the defect, but I gotta act like he did. You know what I mean? I get the giggles in step 6 meetings when people are going, well, I asked God to remove it, and I guess he just hasn't yet. It's like, first of all, if you wanted to do it, why would you need willingness, right? And I just I woke up today and I still wanted to do it, so I guess God's slacking. So it hit me I worked with my mother because I was unemployable when I got sober, and she gave me a job filing, and then I went to school and got more useful. But anyway, she worked near, where she lived, and I had caught up closer to the kids. And so I would be going to lunch, and she'd say, oh, on your way back, can you grab me a Jersey Mike's? And it just made me crazy because it wasn't on the way back. It's like, we lived here. I mean, the office is here, and my house is here because I'm running home for lunch, and Jersey Mike's is up here in Blue Ash. And she would say, on your way back. It's not. But I would be fine, but she'd get the body language and the eye roll and the big sigh, and my God, she has inconvenienced me, Never mind, she's providing my livelihood. And one day it just occurred to me, I wonder what a good daughter would do, What would a nice person say? So I thought, all right, I'm just going to say I'd be glad to. Plus, full disclosure, office to my house to Jersey Mike's, back to the office, about 5 miles. But it's not on the way. So I laid the trap and said, I'm going home for lunch. And of course she said, will you get me a sandwich? And I went, I'll be glad to, And I got her a sandwich, and I continued to practice that behavior. It came up a couple times a week. And a couple weeks later, I realized it didn't bug me to do it. And a week after that, I was glad to do it. And a week after that, I heard myself say, Mom, I'm going out for lunch. Can I bring you a sandwich? And a week after that, I remembered this woman is a 2-time lung cancer survivor. And we had a second-floor office, and any day she didn't have to go down the stairs for lunch was a good day for her. Well, what changed there? Same thing. Ask God, but my actions change. What's God's deal in this? He changed my heart. If God didn't change our hearts while we're here, it would suck just as bad now to go to meetings, read the book, get Jersey Mike's, as it did the day we got here. We get here and it's hard, and we have to concentrate, and we have to think about what we're doing, and we don't want to do it, but we're going to do it anyway. And then it's kind of habit. By 2 or 3 months, I'd be like, I'm not going to a meeting tonight. I've been going every day. I'm not. And as I'm putting on my coat, okay, fine, but I'm not going to. Okay, fine, I'll get a cup of coffee, but I'm not staying. Okay, our Father who art in heaven, whatever. I stayed home one night because I thought I'm tired of doing laundry at 10 o'clock, because I did probably 12 to 14 meetings a week the first 2.5 years I was sober. And so I thought, I am staying home tonight because I'm always doing my laundry at 10 p.m. So I stayed home, and I turned on the TV, and I went, oh, Fresh Prince, I heard that's really good. I've never seen it. And then whatever's on. So when I started my laundry? 10 o'clock. So I was like, that experiment failed. I just went back to my regular meetings. But so the deal here is that yes, do I ask God to remove it? Absolutely. Do I need to act like he did? Absolutely. But what happens is, as I begin to practice this new behavior, it becomes less hard. And then it's a habit. And then I kind of like doing it, and then it brings me joy. Same action as the day that I didn't want to do it. So to me, 6 and 7 are just, the 12 and 12, and trust me, that's about the only place you will ever hear me quote the 12 and 12. I'm just kind of a big book girl and always have been. But, when it says it separates the men from the boys, it's like step 6 is that next big surrender after step 1. Because step 6 and 7 is when I am laying down that tool belt and taking your hands. And that's a scary thing if I've always used my tools to get what I wanted. 8 and 9 were covered masterfully, but I'm going to talk about 2 quick amends because sometimes, I don't know, well, just because. They are both about making amends to parents who were deceased. My dad died while I was in treatment. My husband's dad died before he got sober. Chuck's last words to his dad were, "I hate you." And so, my dad died, and I got sober, and about 2 months sober, I went up to Oxford to a meeting, and I got there late, so they just know I was Beth from Cincinnati. And then at the very end of the meeting, this guy started, and I'd noticed him, he kind of looked like my dad, he sat like my dad, he drank his coffee like my dad. And at the end, he goes, "I don't know how many of you remember Jim Kirby, but Jim always used to say, 'Well, that's my dad,' right?" And I mean, the hair on my arms is standing up. And so after the meeting, I went and told him who I was, and he just burst into tears. It turned out my dad was a sponsor, and that whole thing. But what occurred to me later was, I grew up in a small town. I mean, our family doctor was my grandma's doctor, my doctor, Dad's doctor. Anybody who has kids, if somebody asks you how your kids are, you just want to be able to tell them they're doing okay. They don't have to be rock stars or rocket science. You just want to tell them they're okay. And my amends to my dad was that as long as I lived in Cincinnati sober, which was 14 years before we moved, twice a year I went up to his home group. So his friends knew I was okay, because that's what he would want. If you asked him, "Jim, how's Beth doing?" he would want to say, "Oh my God, she's sober, and look at these kids, and she's working here." So that's what I did. And after that, when I moved, I sent a Christmas card to a sponsor every year till they died. So that was my amend to my dad. Chuck, Chuck's was a little different, and his sponsor had him write the graveside letter and everything, but that just never really did it. He just would get a twinge, and I tell this with permission, but he would just kind of get a twinge every time he thought about his dad. He'd get that little wrench in the gut. And Keith Lewis was speaking in Cincinnati, and Chuck just, in the thank the speaker line, said, "I really envy that you got to see your dad sober." And Keith said, "Go stand over there," and we know how to follow directions from old timers, so he went and stood over there till the line cleared. And Keith told him, "Find someone who reminds you of your dad. He doesn't have to look like your dad, but someone who reminds you of your dad. See if they will stand in and make the amend directly." Dick Martin happened to be there taping. Dick was a principled man, and so was Chuck's dad. And so Chuck went and talked to Dick. He didn't know him very well, and Chuck went and talked to Dick and said, "Would you stand in?" Dick said he would. Whew, okay. So Chuck said, "Dad." And Dick pushed up his glasses, straightened his tie, said, "Yes, son, what can I do for you?" And the thing is that anytime Chuck was a kid, when he would go talk to his dad when his dad got home to work, and he said, "Dad," his dad would push up his glasses, straighten his tie, and say, "Yes, son, what can I do for you?" And Chuck got to make that amend as if his dad was standing there and he was free. So to some of you who have deceased parents or siblings or whoever, and you made that amend, but it just hasn't settled, there is always a way. God will show you. I sponsored a woman who was in the same kind of place, and I told her that story, and I just said, you will know. When that person comes, you don't have to go find them, you'll know. And somebody came and spoke at our home group, and Debbie's like, "That's her." And, she knew it was her. Now, it took her a year to ask her, but she made the amend, and she was free. So that whole amends thing, is so important. I was hanging out with somebody. We went to go shoot pool, and I was probably a couple years sober, and we went in. He stopped dead, and he said, "I don't really want to be here. Can we go play pool somewhere else?" And I didn't care, but he goes, "What do you think about that?" And I said, "Well, I'm just grateful I don't have to live like that anymore," which he really took well. But I realized right then I couldn't remember the last time I had to cross the street because I saw somebody else. I couldn't remember the last time I had to duck down another aisle. Nobody has the power to ruin my day if I walk into a room and they're there. I don't have to duck, I don't have to hide, and you don't have the power to ruin my day unless I give it to you. And if you move my meter that much, there's either an amend owed or I got a resentment I need to look at. Because I have found that people I don't like just don't really move my needle one way or the other. I just don't like them, and I don't have to. I don't know about you. My sponsor said if I like everybody, I'm not going to enough meetings. So, the spiritual to the appendix of spiritual experience says that spiritual awakening is becoming aware of the presence of God. That's all it is. And so if I take that back to step 12, what step 12 says to me is I have become aware of the presence of God as the result of these steps. The steps were my path to God. The steps were how I found God. Like I said, step 3, if I could have done it there, I would have been done. But because of working the steps and clearing away the wreckage and being able to look the world in the eye and being able to be alone at perfect peace and ease, I have become aware of the presence of God as the result of these steps. I try to carry this message to alcoholics. What message is that? I don't know about you, but in North Carolina, there are occasionally meetings that you can come to and leave and not be sure that you've been to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Step 3 in the big book says being convinced. Being convinced of what? That we're alcoholic and cannot manage our own lives. No human power can relieve our alcoholism. God could and would if he were sought. That's the message I need to be carrying to a newcomer, you know. Joe and Charlie kind of used to joke, if God chases them out, whiskey will chase them back. You know, and higher power, being of all understanding, pick a name, it's okay. But the bottom line is, I proved pretty conclusively that alcohol was a power greater than me, so I better hope there's one power out there bigger than alcohol. And you know, for me, it has been God. I was raised in church. I didn't come in mad at God. I didn't come in afraid of God. But I'll tell you, I was not praying when I got here because I didn't want him to know where I was. You know, it's like he can't find me if I don't turn on that little beacon. But there's this reading talking about just carrying this message. This is not from conference-approved literature, but I think it's pretty pertinent to what can happen when we forget. Because, you know, the thing is, we get into AA and we make friends and we're glad to see them. And I don't know about you, but I've gone to meetings, heck, where I live, and I come in, there's 12 seats saved. And anywhere I walk up, people might look up and say hi, or they might not. You know, my old home group, we had a greeter position that was inside, not just at the door, but there's somebody in the room to look for, because you can come through a gauntlet of greeters and then be alone, you know, while people are walking past you, you know, where the coffee is, nobody talks to you. I don't know how many times I walk in a meeting, see somebody sitting by themselves and nobody talking to them, and it breaks my heart. I moved at 14 years sober. I was the new girl moving, and it was no fun. You know, if I hadn't been trained, walk in, shake every hand, I could have come and gone without ever talking to another human being a lot of times. You know, we get excited, we get busy, we're happy to see our friends, and we're not real good at looking outside of ourselves. You know, Dick always used to say, Dick Martin, his wife is my sponsor and has been for many, many years, Peg, and Dick always said, look for the lonely soul. You know, look for the ones sitting by themselves. Don't just give them your number. Take a second. Open the meeting schedule, circle the meetings where you go, and write your name next to it. You know, I tell women, you may not remember who Beth is, but at least you know if you go here, you'll see a face you have seen before. Because when you just hand them a phone list and walk out, I don't know about you, but when I drank, I had this big pile of cocktail napkins on top of my dresser. That was my phone directory, you know. It looked the same as a list that you hand me. I don't know who's who. I won't go there. Anyway, this is called the life-saving station. On a dangerous seacoast where shipwrecks often occur, there was once a crude little life-saving station. The building was just a hut, and there was only one boat, but the few devoted members kept a constant watch over the sea, and with no thought for themselves, went out by day and night, tirelessly searching for the lost. Many lives were saved by this wonderful little station, so it became famous. Some of those who were saved and various others in the surrounding area wanted to become associated with the station and give it their time and money and effort for the support of its work. New boats were bought, new crews were trained. The little life-saving station grew. Some of the members of the life-saving station were unhappy that the building was so crude and poorly equipped. They felt a more comfortable place should be provided as the first refuge of those saved from the sea. So they replaced the emergency cots with beds, put better furniture in the enlarged building. Now the life-saving station became a popular gathering place for its members, and they decorated it beautifully and furnished it exquisitely because they used it as sort of a club. Fewer members were now interested in going to sea on life-saving missions, so they hired lifeboat crews to do the work. The life-saving motif still prevailed. In the club's decoration, there was a liturgical lifeboat in the room where the club initiations were held. About this time, a large ship was wrecked off the coast, and hired crews brought in the boatloads of cold, wet, and half-drowned people. They were dirty and sick and had many colored skins. The beautiful new club was in chaos, so the property committee immediately had a shower house built outside the club where victims of the shipwreck could be cleaned up before coming inside. At the next meeting, there was a split in the club membership. Most of the members wanted to stop the club's life-saving activities as being unpleasant and a hindrance of the normal social life of the club. Some members insisted upon life-saving as their primary purpose and pointed out they were still called a life-saving station. But they were finally voted down and told if they wanted to save lives of all the various kinds of people who were shipwrecked, they could begin their own life-saving station down the coast. So they did. As the years went by, the new station experienced the same changes that had occurred in the old. It evolved into a club, and yet another life-saving station was founded. History continued to repeat itself, and if you visit that seacoast today, you'll find a number of exclusive clubs along the shore. Shipwrecks are frequent in those waters, but most of the people drown. I used to read that at the end, but it's kind of depressing, so... But, you know, I mean, you can read that and look at AA and, treatment centers, you know, a lot of stuff. I mean, we have been through some of this, you know. I don't want to forget, my purpose here is to be on the firing line and introduce, you know, the job of my home group is to provide a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous for a newcomer. I better be sure that we're actually talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. I have been to, Kent said that, you know, where he lives, every meeting you walk in, there's a big book on the table. I walked into a meeting in Cincinnati carrying a big book and was told, oh no, Beth, this is a discussion meeting. There's a problem. There's a problem. Are we sure there's a book on the table? Are we sure that we're like actually encouraging people to read the book? You know, are we sure that they are sponsored? I'm stunned at the number of people who have been sober for years who had no idea that there was an inventory maybe with columns. You know, I have learned to never assume that someone has worked the steps. I'm learning to never assume that they drink. I never thought a question to a newcomer in Alcoholics Anonymous might include, did you drink? But, you know, it has to. And not because we're exclusive. My God, I'm a child of the 70s. I mean, better living through chemistry is our motto, you know. But in my own case, as drugs began to interfere with my drinking, they had to go. Because anything that interfered with my drinking had to go. And that included drugs. One by one, I put drugs down because they got between me and a drink. The only thing I ever miss occasionally is the diet pills, because it's the only time in my life that, like, I could drink for days, my house was clean, and I was skinny. You know, all at once. But, you know, like it or not, we have a responsibility to be sure of the message that we are carrying. You know, this message, not my message. You know, practice these principles in all our affairs. That means I can't just be a spiritual giant in the meeting and go be a jerk when I get out. You know, we are people watchers. We are people watchers. I was, sometime in my first couple years in my home group met in downtown Cincinnati, and there was a pay parking lot right across. It was a big church on 4th Street, and so it was just easier to pay the $2, you know, for me anyway, than to walk. Well, if there's a Reds game, you had to go really early because those baseball people, you know, took our parking places, and so I went early, and the kid's working in the lot, and he says, you know, can you park over there because there's a game? Well, this is my space. I always park here, and he's like, well, yeah, but you know, could you park over there? And this is my space. You know, I want to park over. Please, could you park over there? Okay, fine. You know, so I go park over there, but I wheel my car over and I slam my car door and I flounce past so he knows that he has annoyed me. You know, and then I go to my home group to be spiritual, and so I'm in the greeter line. This church had 2 or 3 steps down into the downstairs room, and there was a wheelchair ramp, and we would just line both sides of it. So it was a gauntlet. There was about 30 people greeting. You may as well just run down high-fiving. I mean, there was a ton of people. So I'm in there greeting, welcome to East 4th Street. Welcome to East 4th Street. Welcome to East 4th Street. And I hear this voice go, oh, yeah, we met. Yeah, it's the parking lot guy. And it hit me like, God, what if that had been his first meeting? You know, what if I am in Kroger, whatever groceries you have up here, so annoyed because the person in front of me had 15 items in a 12-item line, and I'm a counter, I count things, so I'm going to know if you have 15 items in the 12-item line, and I take it out on the cashier. And then she shows up 3 days later at a meeting, at her first meeting, and I'm there. Does she want what we have? Is she going to put her child in our care if she brings her teenager to a meeting and here I am having shown out all over town? I keep an AA bumper sticker. Actually, my license plates say "Yay God," and then I have a teeny tiny circle triangle. And I know people who said they don't put it on their car because they drive so bad. I keep it on my car because it makes me drive better. Okay? I just can't, in good conscience, wheel around somebody and flip them off and drive away with "Yay God" on my license plate. So it makes me act a lot better than I feel some days, But we are the only copy of the big book that people see, and it's kind of like sometimes everybody gets sober and then they all want to go be a counselor, and it's like if everybody had become a counselor, where would the rest of us be who got 12-step at work? We have to be everywhere. My daughter just rolls her eyes and says, "We can't take you anywhere," because somewhere we know somebody always. She went in the Army and at her basic training graduation, we're coming out, and this woman and I are kind of looking. Now we're in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, right? And this woman and I are kind of looking at each other. So, it turns out she's from Chicago. I used to be from Cincinnati. Now I'm from North Carolina. We met in St. Louis at Women to Women. So Chuck and my mom and Sarah get down to the end. Mom's like, "Now where is she?" And they're just, "We can't take her anywhere." But we do, the book says that fellowship will grow up about you. And some of you who have moved in sobriety, you're at work on the second day and somebody invites you to lunch and we go, "Sorry, I'm having lunch with friends." And they're just like, "How can you do that? You just got here." But, there's a fellowship everywhere in every language. It sounds the same. The big book thing last night, I got to go to Iceland. So we went to an Icelandic speaking meeting, and a lot of them speak English there too. But first they were reading the second half of Dr. Bob's Nightmare, and we're following along in English, and you could tell by the rise and fall where they were in the book and where they laughed. And then there was a 10-minute speaker, and so it just, it pretty much not understanding a word, but right in the middle he's like going on, and then he stops and he goes, "And blah, blah, blah." And then he goes on. I almost fell out of my chair. It's like apparently blah, blah, blah is universal. Doesn't matter what language you speak when you are talking about that. But, for a chick who was sitting on a bar stool in the Dewdrop Inn, I thought when I started to drink, I started to breathe, and I thought my world opened up. But what alcohol did from then on was took a big world and made it smaller and smaller and smaller. And my world pretty much got as big as the bar stool on the Dewdrop Inn when I was done. And I could not have told you that I would be complaining about jet lag or, talking about being in Iceland or Arkansas or Tennessee or New Jersey, all of these places, and seeing people I know. I love Ellen, Mike and I have talked. I've not met his wife. Kent and I have known each other for years, Debbie and I. Ron and I are still trying to figure out if we met or just crossed paths, but I've met his brother. We are just it's just like this big giant family reunion of the children of God, It is like we are all God's kids. Chuck Chamberlain used to say, "We are all God's kids. We should act like it. We should learn to play nice with the other kids." And that is so crucial to me. My mom died in 2017, and that relationship was healed. I hated that woman. I laid every problem I ever had at her feet, and when I got sober, I literally started with, "What would you say if you liked her?" That's where I started speaking with my mom. And when she died, I was with her, and the last thing I said to her was play nice with the other kids, and I kissed her on the forehead. And she died in January of 2017. And I miss her, and I never thought I would say that. There were earlier years where I was just counting the days till she was gone. But that relationship was restored. Families are reunited here. Sometimes they're not families of origin, but sometimes they shouldn't be. But we get all of these other people, and we get to play together, and we get to laugh together, and we get to grow up together. Because of Alcoholics Anonymous and learning to practice these principles in all of my affairs, I'm not just a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm a wife. I met and married my husband in Alcoholics Anonymous. I heard him speak. He was about a year sober. I'd never seen him before. Turned out his sponsor wouldn't let him come to the AA clubhouse until he had a year. And he spoke, and I tell him that I knew right then I wanted what he had, and I was willing to go to any lengths to get it, which is his favorite part of my talk. But I never forgot his name, which is saying something for me. But we just kind of crossed paths, over the next year. We'd cross paths here and there. We had no idea we would date, much less get married. But we started hanging out a little more, and then we did something fascinating. We decided to date with our clothes on. And, it's amazing what happens when you do that, because we got to know each other. We didn't have that problem solving of, I'm mad at you, let's make up in bed. We had to actually walk through things, and we got to know each other, and we fell in like, and we fell in love. And we got married a year and a half after we started to date, and my kids gave me away. They were 8 and 10. What a joy. Great events do come to pass here. We're still married. We still like each other. We were married 27 years in July. He had to retire medically a few years ago. That wasn't in our plans, That was another time where, life has turned upside down, huge financial hit. There were just some dark times there. But one day at a time with Alcoholics Anonymous, sometimes day at a time is too long. Sometimes I would wake up at 8 a.m. and I just can't do this. Well, okay, I'll go to work till 10. And at 10, noon looked doable, and at noon I figured I may as well get lunch, and at 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock looked possible, and at 3 I may as well stay till 5. And I had months of that. That wasn't a week, But we do come out the other side. I saw a t-shirt once that says, when God closes one door, he opens another, but these hallways are a bitch. And we all get our turn in the hallway. We all do. But the thing is, when that door opens on the other end, we are all here to say welcome back, and we've been here the whole time. You just couldn't see us. You just couldn't hear us. You couldn't feel us. We were here, but you weren't in the hallway. You were at the mountain alone. So to all of you, God's children, when you come in and we say just depend on God for everything, that's kind of a foreign concept. It's like your sponsor tells you trust God, and you're thinking, I must not explain things right. I need rent money, and good, go work with that new girl. Let me try again. But what I didn't realize till I got here is that I had been turning my life over to one power the whole time. It was just alcohol. I looked to alcohol to cheer me up. I looked to alcohol to keep me company. Alcohol solved my problems. I could walk into a room. I walk into a room that separates itself into two groups, all of you and me. Everybody's looking at me. I don't know any of you. I don't like any of you. I already know you don't like me. 3 drinks later, it is the friendliest crowd I've ever seen. If I've had certified mail and I don't know what to do, 3 weeks later, I intuitively know, tear up the letter. Alcohol solved my problem. There was one who had all power that solved my problem. It was alcohol. So the concept of turning my life over to one power greater than me really isn't that foreign after all. I have been doing it all along. It was just the wrong power. And in the 60s, Bill wrote a letter to Carl Jung, which Mike probably has a copy of. It's also in Language of the Heart. Bill wrote a letter to Dr. Jung, and Dr. Jung wrote back because Bill said, I wonder if anybody ever told him what happened after Roland left. So he wrote a letter and told him, Roland, Ebby, me, AA, blah, blah, blah. So Dr. Jung writes back and said that, he was glad to hear it, and he had often wondered, and that, in his day, they had to be really careful about what they said. So basically, they didn't talk about God a lot in his profession. And he said that he thought that alcoholics more than, and I'm going to misquote this, I just warn you, but that more than most, the alcoholic thirsts for spiritual wholeness, and union with God. And that it was interesting to him that in Latin, the same word, spiritus, was used for the highest order and the most depraved poison. Same word. And he said that he thought man of his own accord could not resist that evil without either a religious conversion or the protective wall of human community. And that blew me away when I read that, because in Alcoholics Anonymous, we get both. You walk in the door and you are surrounded by a protective wall of human community. Those are some powerful words. But we protect you while you find this path to this higher order that can guide your life. And he closed his letter with a phrase that said, spiritus contra spiritum, which means spirit works against the spirit. So that when we are under the power of alcohol, God just can't even get in. You know, the alcohol works against God. But by its very nature, when things flip and God comes into our lives, the alcohol can't get in while we're walking with God. That's some power, you know. That is some power. So, am I a child of God? You better believe it. You know, I just heard Vanoy recently, and she was talking about the Lord's Prayer, and I guess she was having a hard time, and somebody said, you know, you need to own that prayer. You need to own that prayer. And she said, what do you mean? And he said, look how it opens, Our Father. He said, you are the daughter of a king. So I come to you today, Beth Hartley, child of God, daughter of a king. And I would ask all of us to remember that we are children of God, and let's play nice with the other kids. Thank you.
Okay, we'd like to close this meeting with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.